being resourceful, I think, is the, that you can't, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And of course, as you mature and get into the business world and anything you do on a team, you very quickly realize that it's not about just your own resourcefulness, it's about team resourcefulness and how does that work. And so this is 1994. Nobody has heard of the internet, very, very few people. And I came across the fact that the World Wide Web, was growing at something like 2,300% a year. This is in 1994, and anything growing that fast is, even if its baseline usage today is tiny, it's growing so fast, it's gonna be big. And so I looked at that and I was like, there's gotta be, I should come up with a business idea and that get, on the internet and then let the internet grow around this and we can keep working on it. And so I made a list of products that I might sell online and I started force ranking them. And I picked books because books is super unusual in one respect, which is that there are more book items in the book category than there are items in any other category. There are 3 million different books active and in print around the world at any given time. So the founding idea of Amazon was to build universal selection of books. The biggest bookstores only had 150,000 titles. And so that's what I did. And I hired a small team and we built the software. I moved to Seattle, and everything I've ever done has started small. Amazon started with a couple of people, and Blue Origin started with 5 people, and the budget at Blue Origin was very, very small. Now the budget at Blue Origin approaches $1 billion a year. And next year it'll be more than $1 billion. And Amazon, it literally was 10 people. Today it's 500,000 people, but it's hard to remember for you guys, but for me it's like yesterday I was driving the packages to the post office myself and hoping one day we could afford a forklift. And so for me, I've seen small things get big, and it's part of this day one mentality. I like treating things as if they're small. Amazon, even though it is a large company, I wanted to have the heart and spirit of a small one. There have been so many, we haven't had any existential crises, knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anything. But we've had a lot of kind of dramatic events. I remember early on, we only had 125 employees when Barnes & Noble, the big United States bookseller, opened their online website to compete against us, barnesandnoble.com. We'd had about a 2-year window. We opened in 95, they opened in 97. And at that time, all of the headlines, and the funniest were about how we were about to be destroyed by this much larger company. We had 125 employees and $60 million a year in annual sales, 60 million with an M. And and Barnes & Noble at the time had 30,000 employees and about $3 billion in sales. So they were giant, we were tiny, and we had limited resources. And the headlines were very negative about Amazon. And the one that's most memorable was just Amazon.toast. And so I called an all-hands meeting, which was not hard to do with just 125 people. And we got in a room, and because it was so scary for all of us, this idea that now we finally had a big competitor, that literally everybody's parents were calling and saying, are you okay? It's usually the moms calling and asking their children, are you going to be okay? So, and I said, look, it's okay to be afraid, but don't be afraid of our competitors, because they're never going to send us any money. Be afraid of our customers. And if we just stay focused on them and instead of obsessing over this big competitor that we just got, we'll be fine. And I really do believe that. I think that if you stay focused, then the more drama there is and everything else, no matter what the drama is, whatever the external distraction is, your response to it should be to double down on the customer, satisfying them, not just satisfying them, delighting them. I believe in the power of wandering. All of my best decisions in business and in life have been made with heart, intuition, guts, not analysis. When you can make a decision with analysis, you should do so. But it turns out in life that your most important decisions are always made with instinct, intuition, taste, heart. And that's what we'll do with this day one foundation too. Right. And the customer is going to be the child. This is so important because the secret sauce of Amazon, where there are several principles at Amazon, but the number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor. And I talk so often to other CEOs and some other CEOs and also founders and entrepreneurs, and I can tell that even though they're talking about customers, they're really focusing on competitors. And it is a huge advantage to any company if you can stay focused on your customer instead of your competitor. So then you have to identify who is your customer. So at the Washington Post, for example, is the customer the people who buy advertisements from us? No, the customer is the reader. And in the school, who are the customers? Is it the parents? Is it the teachers? No, it is the child. At almost every all-hands meeting, I say, look, when the stock is up 30% in a month, don't feel 30% smarter. Because when the stock is down 30% in a month, it's not going to feel so good to feel 30% dumber. And that's what happens. Never spend any time thinking about the daily stock price. I don't. The stock is not the company, and the company is not the stock. And so as I watched the stock fall from 113 to 6, I was also watching all of our internal business metrics, number of customers, profit per unit, everything you can imagine, defects, etc. Every single thing about the business was getting better and fast. And so as the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was going the right way. I don't want to regret. When I'm 80, now 90, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have in my life. And most of our regrets are acts of omission. They're things we didn't try. It's the path untraveled. Those are the things that haunt us. And I think that when you think about the things that you will regret when you're 80, they are almost always the things that you did not do. They are acts of omission. Very rarely are you going to regret something that you did and it failed and didn't work or whatever. But the acts of omission, the thing, it's not, and again, I'm not just talking about business things. It's like, I loved that person and I never told them. And then, 50 years later, you'd be like, why didn't I tell her? Why didn't I go after it? So that's the kind of life regret that is very hard to be happy about when you're telling yourself in a private moment that story of your life. I made my grandmother burst into tears. And the way I did it was we were driving on a long road trip, and she was a chain smoker. And I was probably, 10 years old, so this was around 1974. And it was in a period of time where there were heavy radio advertisements, sort of anti-smoking radio advertisements, trying to convince people to stop smoking. And one of the advertisements had this figure in it. It said something like, every puff of a cigarette takes so many minutes off of your life. I think it was 2 minutes, but I can't remember. Every puff of a cigarette. So I sat there in the back seat on this long car ride and calculated how many years she had taken off of her life. And in my 10-year-old mind, I had been extremely clever to do this. And so when I was finished with my arithmetic, I proudly announced to her how many years she had taken off of her life. And I got a reaction I did not expect, with her bursting into tears. And so my grandfather stopped the car and he took me out of the car. And I had no idea what was about to happen because he had never said a cross word to me. And I thought he might actually be angry with me, but he wasn't. He took me out we had some privacy from her. And he said these incredible words. He said, you're gonna figure out one day that it's harder to be kind than clever. First of all, when any criticism, my approach to criticism and what I teach and preach inside Amazon is, when you're criticized, first look in a mirror and decide, are your critics right? If they're right, change. Because there are two kinds of critics. there are well-meaning critics who, they're worried it's not going to work, but they do want it to work. And so it could be, I can give you an example, customer reviews would be one of those. When we first did customer reviews 20 years ago, some book publishers were not happy about it because some of them were negative. And so it was a very controversial practice at that time, but we thought it was right, and so we stuck to our guns and had a deep heel on that and didn't change. But there's a second kind of critic, which is the self-interested critic, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So they can be any kind of institution, competitors, of course. And so when you are doing something in a new way, and if customers embrace the new way, what's going to happen is incumbents who are practicing the older way are not going to like you. And they're going to be self-interested critics. And so you do need, as you're looking yourself in the mirror, to try and tease those two things apart. In our view, we have workers' councils, of course, and we have very good communications with our employees. So we don't believe that we need a union to be an intermediary between us and our employees. But of course, at the end of the day, it's always the employee's choice, and that's how it should be. So but for sure, we would be very naive to believe that we're not going to be criticized. I mean, that's just part of the terrain. You have to accept that. One thing I tell people is, if you're going to do anything new or innovative, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. If you can't afford to be misunderstood, then for goodness sake, don't do anything new or innovative. All big institutions of any kind are going to be and should be examined, scrutinized, inspected. Governments should be inspected. Government institutions, big educational institutions, big nonprofits, big companies. They're going to get scrutiny. It's not personal. It's kind of what we as a society want to have happen. So that's one thing, and I remind people internally when if they don't take this personally. That will lead you in a lot of wasted energy. This is just normal. It's actually healthy. It's good. And all of our senior executives operate the same way I do. They work in the future. They live in the future. None of the people who report to me should really be focused on the current quarter. I always tell people. Sometimes I get we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say, thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance. And then why do I need to make 100 decisions today? If I make like 3 good decisions a day, that's enough. You never want to be that guy, and we all have a coworker who is that person who, as soon as they come into the meeting, they drain all of the energy out of the room. You can just feel the energy level go, whoosh. You don't want to be that guy. So you want to come into the office and give everybody a kick in their step